Gotta love a matchup between two of the least picked factions in the game. That's right, Demons of Chaos versus no one else but Vampire Coast. We've got Lenorm here as the Demons of Chaos, the submitter of this replay. And let's go ahead and take a look at his build. He's got Exalted Great Unclean One, of course with Lore of Nurgle, Bringers of Beguilement, the Exalted Demonettes of Slaanesh in a flanker position alongside him. You've got more, let's see, Demonettes here, Exalted Demonettes even. I believe there's one more on the far side over there. Frolickers Bubonic, the regiment are now Nurglings, which you don't see often at all. In fact, I don't even remember what they have. Damage Reflection, passive damage reflection, interesting. Plus a little bit of self-heal if in melee. Actually forgot these guys existed, but that seems pretty good. I don't know why you don't see them more often. I don't know. So a lot of the demon regiments of renown seem good on paper, but for whatever reason you don't see them that much in their respective monogods factions of builds. Sour Guts are another good example of that. Their sort of in melee explosion makes them actually a great hybrid unit, very tanky against certain types of cavalry and mobile unit attacks. Chromatic Aberrations, the blues, of course. We've got some more blues and pinks through the center. And that's pretty much going to be it. As for the Vampire Coast here, attempting to hold out, Luther Harkon up in the sky. I believe this is Anti-Kaiju, another friend of the channel, regular on here as well. We've got deckhands, bomber mobs, and some pistol mobs, handgun mobs, Shade Wraith deck gunners, backline of animated hulks, couple of mortars as well, so nice. Deep gun formation here for the Vampire Coast. This is a very traditional kind of Vampire Coast playstyle with overlapping layers of zombie guns, fleet captain of vampires, and then Luther to act as kind of the mobile hit piece. And interesting to see Luther here. I believe it is disrupted, actually reduces melee, or physical resistance rather. That is going to be advantageous, of course, given all demon units have some form of physical resistance. But yeah, the Pink Horror is also going to face the magical attacks of the Shade Wraith Gunners, who again will bypass that physical resistance entirely, not to mention Frostbite, which actually doesn't apply to their shooting attacks. Instead they have Discouraged, which is very good against demons if they can potentially force them into demonic instability. It does massive amounts of damage, so let's see though. Demonettes charging into zombies. I don't know if I've actually ever seen this before. Again, very unusual matchup. I'd have to check in the history of the channel if we've ever showcased this particular matchup between these two lesser played factions, but I mean, the Demonettes are going to get in there and cause some damage, but man, they're going to take it on the chin as well. The bombers and pistols just doing massive amounts of damage. You can see Lenorm trying to push the Demonettes through, kind of pull through to a degree and engage multiple units at the same time, which he is largely able to do. That said, significant losses still being incurred, and in fact, if we look at the other Demonettes here, they're going for a nice wide flank around into the back of this army, which is definitely the place where Slaanesh wants to be. Meanwhile, Tzeentch and Nurgle holding the front line here. We've got the one Frolickers versus Pirates, and of course the Great Unclean One getting in here with a lot of the ranged units being occupied. Bringers of Beguilement get in the back line, and they are going to just meat carve these handguns in record time. This might be the most lopsided melee engagement in the history of Total War Warhammer. But anyway, yeah, the Demonettes literally almost untouched. I don't think they lost a single model there. Yeah, okay, just barely lost their first model as soon as I bring their card up, which is amazing. The Bombers trying to get in range to bomb them out, but the Demonettes are actually swift enough to close range before they can even get in combat here. And it does look like heal on which side? It's got to be a long cast time, Fleshy Abundance for the Bringers of Beguilement. Yeah, Vampire Coast formation in absolute shambles, but somehow they're ahead on the balance of power. Not really sure why. It seems a little bit fraudulent, but they do still have a lot of units still online, a lot of bombers, a lot of pistols in various positions, and the blues and pinks are pretty much all completely gone. Maybe that's why the balance of power is where it is. The mortars have been raining down death upon them. And Luther Harkon also used up just about all of his ammunition shooting into these demon units and reducing their physical resistance, dealing damage to them, so I don't know, he himself has only done about 200 damage value, but has helped clean up a lot of these demon infantry units, pretty much all, again, all the pinks and blues, so looking to a degree rough for Lenorm, but he does have an advantage in that these elite Slaanesh Demonettes have managed to just absolutely make a mockery of this entire back line. Like, somehow they are engaged in literally every single unit in this entire area, which is very impressive feat to have pulled off. And it's not like they're necessarily dying because they're too spread out either. I mean, they certainly are taking some damage in certain instances. As long as that Nurgle Bro is still online, has enough Winds of Magic to heal them, doesn't need to dedicate it to healing himself, should be just fine. And again, kind of the synergy of the Slaanesh demons plus the Nurgle demons here, the speed and damage plus the tankiness, really nice combination here. Tzeentch, of course, provides the horde, and Khorne is just left sad on the sidelines, being not invited to this build whatsoever. So there you go. But, yeah, Bringers of Beguilement here. Again, their melee defense is such that the zombie and undead units generally are just going to struggle to make any kind of contact with them. 54 melee defense is far outside the realm of anything that Vampire Coast has on the field here in terms of melee capability. So it really has to be, you know, ranged units that deal with the Demonettes. And unfortunately, the pistol mobs, which are probably the best, most cost-effective option, have not been able to successfully operate. A lot of that comes down to the speed. Zombies being the slowest infantry in the game and Demonettes being the fastest. It's just very lopsided, to be honest. Not a fair fight at all for these poor zombie bros. Demonettes, again, just running between these different targets. Looks like they're actually trying to chase down the Admiral, or the Captain, rather, at this point. But perhaps open them up to some potential danger. We see the deckhand mobs being summoned here. It's the melee variants, but yeah, as soon as the Bringers of Beguilement get in contact, they're going to enrage the fleet captain, and that will spell doom, I think, for the Vampire Coast, not being able to heal or summon any more units. They definitely need the extra numbers to try and sustain. The animated Hulks eventually, just through sheer weight of numbers, are starting to wear through some of these Demonettes, and this one Nurgling too, the Frolickers, haven't really highlighted them at all, but they've just been hanging on this flank, reflecting damage and bogging units down, and just generally having a grand old Nurgle time. And as it stands for the Lords, both doing quite healthy, not really wanting to face each other too much. Both Lords quite tanky. Harkon does get outclassed somewhat, even that he has quite a bit less HP. Does have good capacity to heal himself with double passive healing from the Hunger and regeneration, so he's quite tanky in practice. We'll see in the late game how this ends up playing out, but I have the feeling that these Bringers of Beguilement and just in general, you know, the units that remain supporting the Exalted Great and Clean One are strong enough such that they're going to beat the Vampire Coast support pretty decisively, and Harkon will be left all alone against all these scary demons. Perhaps not, though. I mean, Hornswoggle here is going to debuff the melee defense these Exalted Demonettes, and that will lead to them actually taking some significant damage from the animated Hulks, but we see a Fleshy Abundance quickly cast onto them in order for them to hold out. And then, of course, the Bringers of many Beguilements closing the gap. And, you know, strangely enough, at least in this color scheme, the animated Hulks look like they could potentially be a Nurgle unit, to be honest. Like, they look like the estranged cousins of this great unclean one here, I have to say. They do look quite chaotic, in a way. But, yeah, they have some supporting here, but they're quickly going to evaporate. And then, like I said, Harkon enraged. He's charmed. He's just not having a good time at all against all these remaining demons. And it's going to be a victory for Lenorm. So, very fun one. Definitely enjoy seeing these two factions match up. It's something that there's... Yeah, the Slaanesh element makes this probably a relatively painful matchup for Vampire Coast. Granted, Demon's HP and sort of survivability is not wildly high. That's why you definitely need some Nurgle component here, and especially, you know, healing on a big Lord. It is risky, I will say, to take a big, expensive Lord who's a, you know, big sponge for missiles, basically, right? Against a faction that's known for having a great gun line, and Anti-Kaiju had definitely the tools he needed to kill the Great Unclean One if he was able to get it within range. Unfortunately, you know, Lenorm played his cards right, was able to disrupt those range units effectively enough, keep the Great Unclean One back, because there was no, like, cannon pressure or anything. Even if there was cannon pressure, I mean, the DPS of cannons, the accuracy is not such that it was necessarily going to cause a great deal of concern, especially if Lenorm's still able to collapse that backline like he was. But it's definitely an interesting one. You know, Anti-Kaiju's build makes sense on a few levels, but at the same time, he just didn't get the value he needed to from some more expensive pieces like Archon. Yeah, it's just interesting overall. The borders reasonably cost effective, but I'm not sure. I honestly would not know what to do here, because like Sirens, any kind of ethereals are just going to get murdered by demons, because they all have magical damage, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'd go for more like AoE damage from Lore of Deeps rather than trying to heal sustain through, or like summon more units from Lore of Vampires. You know, summoning some crabs would be nice, but especially just like Vangeist's Revenge or Kraken's Pull even. For the, again, the AoE damage, just to burst the demons down quickly, since they are generally flimsy, especially for the Slaanesh units. And I think, let's actually check with Lore of Deeps. I believe the low-tier Tidecall spell also has a speed debuff component, which could be pretty useful against those Slaanesh-type demons. And this is a very unusual situation. I'm talking to, like, a very low percentage of players who are actually going to be playing Vampire Coast and actually facing this matchup, which is even more rare of an occurrence, but it is technically in the game, so let's talk about it. Yeah, so Lore of Deeps here, if we take a look, Tidecall does not have a contact effect. Okay, so it does have a speed debuff, minus 25%, so could potentially be useful in helping to control some of those Slaanesh demons' movements. Spiteful Shot does give magical damage, which can be situationally useful for single target engagements, but not going to be broadly useful for bursting down hordes of demons. I mean, really, you could make an argument for any of these. Fog of the Damned is a decent melee attack debuff, not crazy good. I don't know. You could potentially choose to bring it here if you wanted more of like a melee tank build with like crabs, perhaps. But just generally, it's better to deal damage. Kraken's Pull is relatively expensive, but again, does have the speed debuff minus 45%, and the damage is pretty good. Vangeist's Revenge, if you can get good contact, the damage can be decent. It is pretty expensive and has a long cast time, though, so for, like, Slaanesh demons, it's going to be a lot harder to catch them with something like this. Yeah, I mean, you can see there how long the animation takes to play out, whereas Kraken's Pull, you know, it is a Vortex template with a pretty long cast time, but still, if you can manage to catch them with it, it will be quite devastating. So let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments down below, but hopefully you enjoyed that. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.